Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear friends, I pray you're all well. Right, let's resume Al-Fatiha. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Sayyidina wa Mawlana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Allahumma la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Allahumma 'allimna ma yanfa'una وانفعنا بما علمتنا وامنحنا يا ربنا علما وعملا وقربا يا أرحم الراحمين ويا أكرم الأكرمين يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم زدنا ولا تنقصنا وأكرمنا ولا تهنا وأعطنا ولا تحرمنا وآثرنا ولا تؤثر علينا وأرضنا وارض عنا يا كريم. Okay, so Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allah has blessed us with Surah Al-A'raf, and we were looking at the general trend of people when messages come to them from God, when the messengers produce their miracles and prove that they're from God and God has a message for them. God has commands and demands, and many people turn away. They're just not interested. They'll pretend not to understand the rational arguments. So the miracles come, and then they'll just say it's just a trick. So we saw this, and then we see in other verses of the Quran where whenever prophets came, they either accused them of being magicians because of the miracles, or majnoon, sahirun or majnoon, or someone who's just not got his rational faculties, because what he's saying doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to their twisted approach. But in reality, the arguments are all sound, and they're all there for the benefit of mankind. And people may veer and get used to being on this veered approach, and it's comfortable. But when the problems of that approach pile up, some people look back and they see what Islam is saying and what the believers are saying, and they see that they're off and that they should be aligned with this. And this is the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that even through calamities, Allah turns people to Islam and to Him, and then they accept it, right? So we have this detailed study now of Fir'aun and his courtiers, his people. So the previous stories of the prophets in the surah were brief, but this story we were given a lot of detail. The discourse between him and Sayyidina Musa, and him and his courtiers, and what they did in their country to try and ensure that the message of Sayyidina Musa is not successful. And so let's look at it, and we know that the end is going to be bad. فَانْظُرْ كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الْمُفْسِدِينَ, and look, see how the end of those who cause corruption in the land was. So we'll see that soon. So let's start with we stopped at Sayyidina Musa alayhi salatu wasalam saying to Fir'aun that I'm a messenger from the Lord of the worlds. Now, had he had a brain, he would have realized that he's claiming that he's a Lord. He's ana rabbukumul a'la. The Quran quotes him as saying that I am your highest Lord, your Lord most high. And in fact, he wasn't. And he should have just realized that he should have just realized that I'm a human being, the same as everyone else. I have weaknesses and frailties, the same as everyone else. I have needs, the same as everyone else. There are people here who existed before me, and there are people here who will outlive me. So how could he be the Lord of the worlds? It's just a simple analysis. So Sayyidina Musa said this, and he said that he's been commanded to tell him to let the children of Israel, who these people had enslaved, it's been 400 or so years since the time of the Prophet Yusuf, and they've been enslaved for a large chunk of that time. So free them. But Sayyidina Musa clearly expressed this. Now Fir'aun knew him, and Fir'aun, because he raised him, he was raised in the palace, and Fir'aun knew his truth. Actually, a quick aside, who is Fir'aun? So many contemporary scholars say it was the individual known as Ramses II, and you can search for the remains of his body that preserved in the Egyptian Museum or the Cairo Museum, and you can see the images. That he's still pretty well preserved for someone who's been gone for close to say 3,000 years and or more. So that's part of the truth of the Quranic promise as well. And so anyway, so he ignores these rational arguments and he just says, well, prove it. I don't believe you, right? So he's qala. So here in the Quran, when you have qala, 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 it means there's a two-way discussion happening. And then when the Quran says waqala or faqala, it sometimes it may not have been immediate and there may be another element to it. قال إن كنت جئت بآية فأت بها إن كنت من الصادقين. So he says, so Pharaoh said, if you have come with a sign, then bring it if what you say is true. So this last sentence, إن كنت من الصادقين, it can go in the beginning as well, but it's put at the end for for dramatic effect, and also to highlight his doubt or his claim of a doubt. So first he starts with this word in. In is for shak, tashkik. If this happened, meaning we're not sure. So if you really are, in kunta, if you really are, or if you really have brought, and also jita, from ja'a, something to be tremendous, whatever's coming is tremendous, or whatever has been brought is tremendous. If you really have brought a tremendous, amazing sign, fa'ti biha, right? Then produce it, show it, so bring it. And then he says in again to indicate that he's not entirely convinced of the truth of Sayyidina Musa's claim. So if that's the case, then bring it, right? In kunta min as-sadiqeen. So he's afraid that of what Sayyidina Musa has said is true. He knows he's a righteous person, that Musa was righteous, alayhi salatu wasalam. And what is he afraid of? The same thing people who are in power are afraid of, the loss of that power. And part of this power was manifested by them enslaving Bani Israel, right, the children of the Prophet Yaqub, his descendants. Because they were enslaved, these people had a free labor force. They could make them do whatever, treat them however they wanted. So losing that would cause some turmoil, as they would see it, in their kingdom and the way it was run. He didn't want that. So he says, okay, am I supposed to just take your word for it? If you're true, then you should have a proof. And if you have a proof, provide it. Right, that's what he's saying. Fa'ti biha in kunta min as-sadiqin. So he's just pretending to not know that Musa is a messenger. Right. So if you really min as-sadiqin, those who are rooted in the truth and known for speaking the truth, if you really are one of them, then produce this miracle. Right. So Sayyidina Musa alayhi salatu wasalam did, bi-ayatin, he said in that verse, if you have a significant, because it's going to take something significant to make Fir'aun budge on something, right? If you really have a significant proof, then do it, provide it. Sayyidina Musa didn't respond verbally. He didn't lower himself to Fir'aun's level of, word games. And what did he do? فَأَلْقَى عَصَاهُ. He threw his staff, right? So it says, so Moses threw down his staff, فَأَلْقَى عَصَاهُ فَإِذَا هِيَ ثُعْبَانٌ مُبِينٌ. So this word is interesting. This word, إِذَا, فَإِذَا, إِذَا here is known as إِذَا al-Fujaiyya in Arabic, which means, and suddenly. So here is translated as behold, but it just means suddenly, instantly. This staff, this stick, that he carried, he used it when he was a shepherd, alayhi salatu wasalam. He's thrown it down, and suddenly, here, the staff, thu'banun mubin. It became a real serpent. So, the word thu'ban is reserved for large snakes, like a python or something. These anacondas or something, right? See, these maybe not that long, but it's not like one of the small viper types or rattlesnake types of snake, but the large, the scary ones, right? It's a huge snake like that. And there are various narrations. Some of the scholars of Tafsir have transmitted from the previous scriptures that have been altered. And to be honest with you, those narrations, from some of our Muslim Islamic sources, the strength of those narrations is in question, and some of the details are questionable. So let's just stick with what the Quranic narrative says. فَإِذَا هِيَ ثُعْبَانٌ, a huge, real, scary snake, mubin. Right, it's clear, like Mubin is calling out almost, not verbally, but it's very clear that this stick is now a snake, and it's very, very clear and apparent to Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, to Fir'aun and everyone else there, that it's absolutely real. It is now a snake. And that in and of itself is a huge sign, because what does it say? That the Lord who sent Musa can do anything. He can take a lifeless, inert object, and which is used, has no will or volition, and he can and he can turn it into a real living animal, right? So if he can do that, he can destroy your empire, right? So you best obey. Right? It's very simple. And so he threw it down, and you can clearly, you can guess what their response must have been: fear, right? So firstly, there's the fear of seeing a snake. Secondly, there's the realization a minute ago this was, a wooden staff. So then the natural conclusion is that his Lord, the Lord of Sayyidina Musa, indeed has sent him. Right? Musa alayhi salatu wasalam is a messenger. Not only that, what Musa is demanding must be done. All these things happen in the mind instantly, right? Almost instantly. And they will have got these realizations, and that if they rebel and if they choose not to obey what Musa is commanding them, there will be consequences, and his Lord is capable of carrying them out. All of these things must have just popped into their head. And so what did they do? Did they choose to believe? No. But before that, Sayyidina Musa gave another example, another sign, and the other sign was his hand. The Prophet Musa alayhi salatu wasallam was told to, as we see in Surah Taha, usluk yadaka fi jaybika. Jayb in the modern word is for a pocket, but it's the slit, and so here it's translated as collar, but it's they didn't always have buttons, but putting your hand in from the chest cover, chest opening. So he said put it under your arm, and then he was told to take it out, and his hand would be glowing. Now like not just with a dull glow, but it was incredibly white, right? So like a really bright white light emanating from his hand. And Sayyidina Musa alayhi salatu wasalam had dark skin, right? He wasn't a light skinned man, he had dark skin. And for his hand to go white like that, it's like a really bright white, almost like like if you have an LED light and it's just on low, and then you turn it up to full, and it just radiates just bright white light. His hand was incredibly white like that. So then the next verse he said, وَنَزَعَ يَدَهُ فَإِذَا هِيَ بَيْضَاءُ لِلنَّاظِرِينَ. He drew out his hand out of his collar, and it was shining white for all to see. لِلنَّاظِرِينَ. So it's white, but the point of it going white is for them to see, for them not to just see, but to wonder at it. In our times, due to like the computer generated effects that they can put in movies and these sorts of things, it's quite easy to imagine this. It's quite easy to even just conceive of such brightness coming from a person's hand. However, in the past this wasn't the case, right? They didn't have access to this sort of imagery. So for them to see this is something incredible. Like if you were to see a stick turning into a snake, right, in any time, that's going to be, something amazing, right? But seeing it live, and then if you were to see a man's hand just start glowing incredibly white, and it's just going to A, fill you with awe and wonder, and B, whatever the man has told you that these are signs of, these are proofs of, is going to convince you of the truth of that. So they must have been convinced of the truth of the message of Sayyidina Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. So Imam al-Biqai says here that the stick is, so there were two proofs. One, which is part of Sayyidina Musa's person, his hand, and the second wasn't. And you can look at it another way. One, the physical reality of a thing was changed. So the physical reality of the stick turned into a snake, a serpent. And the second, not the physical reality, but its qualities. Right, the quality of your hand, what skin tone it is, and how strong your hand is, and the size and all of these things, that was changed. Right, the quality, its color, and it was given off that. Both dramatic signs and both signs that can't be replicated. Right, and so this is what happened. What is the response? So Fir'aun sees this. We see that the response that the Quran mentions. Fir'aun said this. In another surah, he says it to the mala, the courtiers, and then they went and they repeated what Fir'aun said. And some had, there's the word sahir in another verse, sahar, of the same incident. Someone who does it a lot, a skilled, versed, practiced magician, right? So that's why the Quran quotes selectively, and the Quran quotes contextually. So that's why certain aspects of a story are mentioned in one surah and other aspects are mentioned. And so if you want the whole thing, you compile it all. But otherwise, you look at what's the focus here is. Here, the focus isn't to tell us that how much, how skilled they were saying Musa is, but here the focus is on them saying he's a magician. So their quote and not the aspect related to him. So it says, قال الملأ من قوم فرعون إن هذا لساحر عليم. The chiefs, so the mala, once again we've seen this word many times before, those who fill people's eyes with awe and admiration, the courtiers, the court of Fir'aun, and they took this quote from him. He said this, إن هذا لساحر عليم. Indeed, this هذا, this man, but it's literally saying, indeed, this is truly a magician who's extremely knowledgeable. He's got deep knowledge of magic, so he's able to pull this off. He's able to do this. But saying inna hadha is, you use it in English, you say this, so you don't really refer to someone with the word this, right? Because it's insulting. So they weren't showing the due reverence and respect that Musa alayhi salatu wasalam quite frankly deserved. But that was their approach, that he's a magician, meaning what he has done is not real. What he has done, there's a whole discussion amongst ulama about magic and the nature of magic. There's some types of magic that is just sleight of hand, just parlor tricks, right? Pick a card, any card, that sort of stuff. And then there's other aspects of it that are real and that can affect people and the real world. And so here, what they're saying is that he's just someone who's skilled. He's put on a light show, so to speak, and he's just done something that it looks amazing, but it's only because of his skill with magic. As opposed to admitting that, no, this is a real transformation that occurred, and we'd best be serious about this matter. So they just said, no, this man, he's just a very, very skilled magician, and that's far, far from the truth, right? And so, and then inna, the nominal sentence with the inna, and then the lam for the emphasis as well. La sahirun, it's really, what is it? It's propaganda. It's the start of someone denying the truth of what's in front of them with a constructed narrative. And you'll see there's people doing it in different times, in all times, even in our time, right? They will construct a narrative, or they will distort the truth of a narrative and put forward another one, and they will just focus on that and ignore the truth and ignore all the people that are saying otherwise. Then they just try to address and debunk that narrative. So that's what they're saying. The problem is that now that they've realized he is a messenger, he's speaking the truth, therefore we do have to get rid of the slaves, Bani Israel. Do they want to? Absolutely not. They don't want to do that. So what they do is they say to their so now they've heard this from Fir'aun, and now they're passing it on to the masses and the other people who they command, actually. So you can imagine, like, the ruler saying it to the ministers go and say it to other people, and they're trying to foment a negative opinion. And they're trying to cause people to instantly reject Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. And how do you do that? What's the simplest way of doing that? Turn their egos against him, right? Someone thinks they deserve a particular thing, they have a right to a particular thing, and what they do is they say, well, he wants this from you. And are you going to give up your right? Are you going to give up your property? Are you going to, what have they done? They don't look at the fact that they've enslaved these people and brutalized them for a long time, right? They don't look at that, but they see that as their right. And when someone has come with the authority and the ability to, with the authority and the demand from God that they free these people, they're trying to twist the narrative. So they said, يُرِيدُ أَن يُخْرِجَكُم مِّنْ أَرْضِكُمْ فَمَاذَا تَأْمُرُونَ? He wants to force you, he wants to expel you from your land. So what do you propose? تَأْمُرُونَ from Amr literally it means command, but here it can mean like, what's your input? So here it's kind of like showing respect for someone else's opinion. Right? So Fir'aun doing this to his courtiers, and then the ministers, and them doing it to those who they follow, who follow them and who they can influence. So فَمَاذَا تَأْمُرُونَ? Like, what do you command? Right? What do you command? And they were just scared of losing their position, their power. It's the same story, throughout history. People don't change, right? Human beings generally fall within a certain archetype, and these people, they didn't want to lose their power. So they're saying, what do you command, right? Has Musa alayhi salatu wasalam said he wants the Egyptians to leave their country? No, he just wants the slaves of Bani Israel freed. So how have they come to this conclusion? It's not a conclusion that's that would naturally come, but because of their corrupt understanding and the dhulm that they've done to people, they think everyone else is going to do the same to them. So they're saying, he wants to take those people, and then they'll have a revolt, and then they'll force us out, or they'll subjugate us. We won't be in charge of our country anymore, our empire, and that's what they want to do. So they're saying, what should we do? How should we deal with this? So immediately Fir'aun is saying this to his courtiers, and then they were saying it to each other, and they later go and say it to others. But Fir'aun said this, so then what was their response? Their response was what they said, we don't want to deal with this right now, because with Sayyidina Musa being there, if they arrested him and imprisoned him, news of this would get out, and it would become something mythical almost, right? A staff turning into a snake and these sorts of things, and they wanted to control the narrative. So if they like how sometimes people who fight for a cause, if something happens to them, they become martyrs, right, in the sight of people, and they become an emblem, a symbol of resistance, or a symbol of that cause. So they didn't want that to happen, right? So if they locked Musa up or harmed him or whatever, this would do that to Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. And so what they did, and his brother Harun, he's mentioned explicitly here. The surah doesn't mention Harun earlier. He is mentioned, the other surahs were mentioned explicitly in this coming verse. And so they didn't want to do that. So they said, delay responding to him. قالوا أرجه وأخاه, and there's various قراءات on this. وأرسل في المدائن حاشرين. So they're saying to Fir'aun, they replied, let him and his brother wait, meaning delay our response to them, and send mobilizers to all cities. So let's not address this situation here and now. Let's not say, fine, we'll give you the slaves, but rather what he's done, they're saying he's come with a trick, and our response can't be immediate. It needs to be a planned response. So let's delay responding to him. And then they said to Fir'aun, وَأَرْسِلْ فِي الْمَدَائِنِ حَاشِرِينَ, send out into the cities, all the major cities of their country, gatherers, people, recruiters, you could say. What would those people do? Those people would go and get all the skilled missions. Ya'tuka, who will immediately, quickly bring you بِكُلِّ سَاحِرٍ عَلِيمٍ, and will bring you every, not just clever, but every skilled, knowledgeable, well-versed magician. So they're saying what Sayyidina Musa did, alayhi salatu wasalam, was magic. So go send other people out who will find who'll find other magicians, and then those magicians can respond on your behalf. Maybe one of them will be lucky, maybe one of them will have the skill to defeat him, right? Because this is a narrative. And what happens, you'll see in life that people, what they'll do is they'll concoct a fake narrative and they'll repeat it so often that they believe it themselves. So these people, their narrative to avoid the truth was that he's doing some sort of magic. So okay, let's bring all the magicians. How can one man surpass everyone of our country? And magic was something that the people in the time were quite skilled at, right? Just like like the Arabs in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam were skilled at poetry, and they're skilled with language. So magic was something that they were skilled at, and so in this situation they were going to use the magicians to try and undermine what Sayyidina Musa alayhi salatu wasalam said. Now they don't care about the truth, but what they don't want is to lose control of the narrative. So that's what they did, right? So let's stop here, and we'll continue inshallah ta'ala from this point on. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.